girl rushing towards the house, all covered in straw. And instead of getting mad at me, she sees my shining eyes and sits down to hear this wonderful story of how a hen lays an egg. And if you think back with hindsight to that story, I mean, there is the making of a little scientist. There's the curiosity. There's the asking questions. You don't get the answer, so you try to find out for yourself. You make a mistake, you do it wrong, you don't give up. Never give up. And you have to have patience. It's all there. When I was 5 years old. Well, at school, I did biology. I wasn't very good at chemistry. I told some of the young people today, you know, you guys know far more than I do about the structures of cells and all these chemical changes that happen. But I loved biology. I loved nature. But most of all, I like going out and watching and learning and writing and waiting and being patient. And when I left school, nearly all my friends went on to university, but we didn't have enough money. My father was off fighting in World War II, and you couldn't get a scholarship back then unless you were good in a foreign language, and I just wasn't. I didn't even know chimpanzee back then. And so, again, it was my mother. She said, why don't you do a course in the secretarial, and then perhaps you can get a job in Africa. Well, the reason I was dreaming about Africa was because when I was about 10, and I know there's some young people here today of 10, I met you earlier, I was reading the books about Tarzan and dreaming of Africa, and I wanted to live in the forest, and he went and married that other stupid Jane. I was passionately in love with him, and I was really jealous of that other stupid Jane. I knew I'd have been a better maid for Tarzan, don't you think, Cass? Anyway, I did that. I became a secretary, and then came the opportunity, a letter from a school friend whose parents had moved to Kenya, inviting me for a holiday. Well, I had this wonderful job in London. It was with documentary films. It wasn't even secretarial. I learned so much that, you know, by happenstance, it served me in very good stead. We've made all these documentary films about the chimpanzees. And I'm one of the few scientists who understands when a cameraman says, that was perfect, let's do it again. I know why he does that, because I know about making films. But anyway, I got this letter. I couldn't save up money in London. It was very expensive living there, it still is. So I went home and lived at home, and I worked as a waitress. I saved up my wages and my tips, and after several months, it took quite a long time. It wasn't one of your fancy hotels where people go to have a nice dinner or romantic little, you know, bit of fun and feel in a good mood and give a nice big tip. It was a hotel where people went after the war for a week's family holiday. So you had to be really nice to them for a whole week. And they couldn't afford a big tip anyway, but I made sure they all knew I was saving up to go to Africa. At any rate, eventually I had enough money for a return fare, because, you know, my mother would obviously not have let me go with just a single fare. I was 23, which will seem old to some of you here and young to others. Depends where you are on the age scale. Actually, it's very young. And when I was out there, I stayed with my friend, and then I got a job in Nairobi, because my mother always taught us, me and my sister, you know, you don't overstay your welcome, you don't sponge on people, you must make your own way. And I was working in Nairobi, a very boring job, and I heard about the late Louis Leakey. And somebody said, Jane, if you're interested in animals, you should meet Louis. So off I go to the Natural History Museum. He's the curator. And made an appointment to see him. And I remember him taking me around, and I wasn't too keen on all these dead, stuffed animals. But I spent hours and hours when I was in London in the Natural History Museum there. So I knew who they were, these animals, and I'd read books. And no television back then, no internet. It was books and libraries, which I still love. And so I could answer many of his questions. And and he gave me a job first as his secretary. And then came the first real magic. Well, I suppose the first magic was that boat trip out to Africa. We had to go all the way around the Cape because of the war within the Suez Canal, which was closed. So to go the long way around. And, you know, can you imagine going off waving goodbye to your family, your friends, and your country? But this adventure, this second adventure, was more important for me. It was going to a now very famous part of Tanzania, Olduvai Gorge. So any of you know anything about paleontology, prehistory, know that some very famous fossils of early humans have been found there. But back then, no human fossils have been found, only some ancient prehistoric giraffes and pigs and things like that, and a few stone tools which the Leakeys were sure were human, and lots of other people said no, they're just worn by the water. But anyway, it was the Africa of my dreams. And after the hard day's work, and it was hard under the sun looking for fossils, digging away at the hard earth, then the other one young girl and I, there were just 6 of us on this expedition. It was very cheap, there was no money for it. And Gillian and I were allowed to go out on the plains, and all the animals were there then. There were the giraffe and the antelopes and the warthogs, but there were also rhinos and lions. And I remember the day when Gillian and I were followed about the length of this auditorium by 2 young male lions, which was a bit scary but very exciting. And I think that's when Louis Leakey decided to offer me this unbelievable opportunity. A young girl straight from England with no degree of any kind being offered the opportunity to study not just any animal, but the one most like us. We truly are part chimpanzee and part gorilla and part orangutan, but the chimpanzee is the closest. 98.6% of chimpan-human DNA is the same in structure. The immune system so similar that chimpanzees can be infected or catch naturally all known human contagious diseases. The structure of the blood, almost identical. And of course this is why they've been used by scientists in medical research. The structure of the brain, almost identical to ours, it's just that ours is a bit bigger. And it shouldn't surprise us, given all this biological similarity, that we find, wow, chimps are capable of intellectual performances we used to think unique to ourselves. How did I first learn about that in the wild? Well, my first months in Gombe National Park were very tough. I wasn't on my own. The reason being that back then, Tanzania, as it is today, was Tanganyika. It was part of the British colonial empire. It was a protectorate. And the British authorities were not prepared to allow this young girl out in the forest by herself. It was filled with possibly dangerous creatures, and they did not want anything to do with it. But Louis Leakey never gave up. And so he persuaded them to let me go, providing I had a companion. And who volunteered to come? That same amazing mother. We had money for 6 months only, and she volunteered to come for 4 of those 6 months. And the reason that it was so wonderful for me to have her there was in those early months, the chimpanzees, who are very conservative, would take one look at this peculiar white ape, because that's what I was, a white ape, and vanish into the undergrowth. But my mother was there when I came down depressed in the evening, knowing that if I didn't see something exciting before that 6 months' money ran out, it would be the end of the expedition. I would have let Louis Leakey down. And she was there to say, but Jane, you're up there on that peak, you're looking through your binoculars. Think of all the things you are learning. How they make a nest at night, how they travel around in small groups, sometimes small groups meeting up into big excited gatherings. And she boosted my morale like that. It was very sad that she left just before the first breakthrough observation. And that was when one day as I was walking through the undergrowth, I saw a black shape crouched over a termite mound. Peering through my binoculars, I saw that it was the one chimpanzee who'd begun to lose his fear of me before the others, because they all have their own distinct personalities. And that was David Gravier, and I couldn't get very close, but I could see his hand reaching out and picking a grass stem and pushing it down into the heap and picking termites off with his lips. And then I saw him pick a leafy twig and strip the leaves. He was modifying that object, he was making a tool. And at that time it was thought that humans and only humans used and made tools. We were defined as man the tool maker. So that when Louis Leakey heard about these observations, of course I saw it many more times after that, he said, well, we shall just have to redefine man, redefine tool, or accept chimpanzees as humans.